And welcome back to A Guy, a Hoosier, and a Hillbilly Walk into Bartertown. I am Hoosier, and I'm joined tonight by Guy and Hillbilly as usual. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing really good.
It's nice and cool where I'm at. I like that.
Yes,
Gotta have
yes,
the
it is
cool this
cool.
time of year.
Indeed. Holidays are right around the corner. Got all kinds of stuff going on. Um, but tonight's not about gift giving, is it?
Nope,
Well, it
nope.
kind of is. It kind of is. I mean, it
Yeah,
could be a gift. You
could
know,
be. Could be.
we're talking about bartering.
Indeed.
So,
Absolutely.
we're talking about bartering in mainly a post-apocalyptic scenario, but it really could be any scenario. So we'll just kind of see where this conversation takes us. But for those of you that aren't aware, what bartering is essentially just the exchange of goods and services without the use of currency. So money, gold, silver, all that stuff. So anything for financial gain, it's not the intent. And this type of system goes back thousands of years and is still used to this day in many areas of the world, including the United States. So, Guy Actual, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on bartering in a post-apocalyptic scenario?
So, bartering is, I think it's going to be critical depending on, how you. Well, I mean, just in general, it's going to be critical in the long run. Obviously, immediately after any scenario where you have, say, a financial crash or you have a sudden change in ability for goods and services to be delivered, or maybe the electrical grid fails or something like that, there's going to be a very short time in which you are going to want to isolate. But once you come out of that isolation, eventually, depending on how long it takes for things to come back on and for people to get reorganized, you're going to have to start to try to trade for stuff, right? Whether that be food and water or antibiotics or other medical services. Maybe you are lucky and you have a dentist that actually still has some supplies that could help you out in some way. So there's a lot of things that you'll probably need, uh, but currency won't be accepted. Your credit cards aren't going to work, especially if it's some sort of an EMP or something like that. Cash, some people might accept cash, but if there's not a government to back it up with, or Federal Reserve to actually guarantee it, it's going to be worthless. So I think bartering is going to be absolutely critical in those scenarios in the long run. And ultimately, I think bartering will play into the rebuilding of the governments itself when you get down to it. So I think it's critical.
I absolutely agree, and I think you're there's going to be a lot of that. Goods for goods. I mean, my grandparents did it when I was growing up. They grew corn and they traded with other farms for everything from you know pork to other vegetables and other meats and milk and everything. They very rarely went to the store. Everything was a trade. But the other aspect I think that's going to be really critical, like with your dentist, for example, is time banking.
Mm.
So, for those that don't know what time banking is essentially you bank services for services, right? So, the dentist performs a service and he may not trade it straight for goods. He may trade it for time in the bank for a service coming back to him. So, like a blacksmith making tools or horseshoes or whatever, or, a glass maker or pottery or, even butchery, you
Yep.
know,
Plowing
all
of a
that
field.
is time banking. And I think that's going to be one of the places where a lot of people are going to be able to do good. But then again, that relies on your trust in the other person and trust in the community that you're going to be a part of. Uh, I think in the very beginning, bartering, you're going to have some really good security when you're doing bartering. What do you
Yep.
think, Hillbilly?
I definitely agree. It, when you're talking about a post-apocalyptic situation, security is a very big deal, and in that situation, time is a very valuable asset, as well as skills. So you want to come up with some sort of deposit or some sort of true, real mutual understanding before you dedicate your time to helping, a butcher, bartering with a butcher or a dentist or whomever. If your neighbor is growing crops or something like that, you're going to need to come up with an understanding of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, time frame. How do we solve disputes?
Mhm.
For example, in that type of situation, tensions are going to be high, morale is going to be low, and there's going to be a lot of panic and stress. So, as simple as a moldy potato could throw somebody over the edge. So, there's got to be an understanding of, what are we going to do in that situation, as well as, the barter system works so well because you can trade knowledge. You can trade the product as well as the knowledge. So help each other out. And I think that will help. But then, from a security standpoint, who all has access, who's going to be involved, who's not going to be involved, and how do you decide who's not going to be involved? How do you decide when somebody's abusing the system?
Mm.
Uh, I think all that plays into. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Hoosier?
Well, I think that's very much, going to be part of it. Especially bringing new people in also will be a huge undertaking. But in the very beginning, when you're trading, straight up goods for goods, um, and you're trying to protect your family or your community, there's got to be a neutral ground
Yep.
place to do that trade. And realistically, you don't want them to be able to track you back to your bug out, right? You don't want them to be able to find where you're at, but you do want to be able to trade with them. So there's going to have to be certain things set up to say, hey, we're going to meet at this location every, 7 days or every whatever it is to do those types of trades. But, knowledge and skills, you give up your knowledge, you have to be trusting of that other person to actually give the knowledge that they said they were going to give to you back. And there's going to be a lot of tension
There is.
in those first days.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say as well. Those first few barters that you first work out with somebody that you hopefully know, but there's a very good chance that this may be a complete stranger. So you're going to have to be very tactful and tactical in how everything functions. You're going to need to look at security. You're going to need to think about how you are going to present those goods. How are you going to carry them in? Are you going to show up in a vehicle? Do you even have a vehicle that's still functioning? So there is a lot that's got to go into those first barters. Now, over time, there have been movies and books that have talked about centralized barter locations, but those are going to take a long time to set up. And they may never actually get set up depending on the attitude of those that are survival and your scenario. If it's a nuclear scenario, that plays even more into it. So, do you have the resources to even have a centralized area where people can actually trust to show up and goods aren't going to be brought in that are radioactive or come from a radioactive or even pass through a radioactive area? There's a lot of materials out there that will carry that radiation forward. So, you have to be prepared in so many different ways. Most people aren't going to have a Geiger counter for serious. You can get them pretty inexpensively now. The professional grade ones, obviously, they are very expensive still because of the way that they detect and the different types of radiation that they detect. Mostly the inexpensive ones, I believe, are going to look at the gamma, number one, and then some of the other types of radiation out there. And gamma is one of the ones that you definitely want to pay attention to. So,
You don't want to become the Hulk.
no, no, it doesn't really work that way. You'll just turn green over time, but you won't be very strong or active. um, the
So
other thing is if you are going to try to set up that scenario and create that barter area, um, you're going to need a team to do it. So, Hillbilly, go ahead.
you both bring up some really good points, and you know, you could practice bartering today, in a safe way. Okay, don't do anything unsafe, but in a safe way, in a non-post-apocalyptic era, what we're in now, normal civilization. You could practice this with your neighbors. You could practice this with friends, with trusted colleagues, acquaintances, and understand that, again. Be very safe about it, even in a non-post-apocalyptic place. Unless you truly trust the person, it should be a centralized location that's not tied to your home. So, but you can practice it in a lot of places these days. It still is practiced. There's a lot of nations where bartering is the main way to survive. So what better way to alleviate any stress in that type of situation than to have to practice now when you still have goods and currencies that are easily accessible.
And it's not just other countries. It's here in the U.S. in the hills and the backwoods and even in just major farming areas. You know, there's still a lot of trading that happens. Some for you know some nice moonshine and but
Mhm.
even in some of the more not so rural areas, there are co-ops that people are part of where they're trading eggs to someone for raw milk. Shh, don't tell don't tell other
I,
groups that people are selling raw milk or
I don't know
trading it
nothing
even.
about that.
But um, it's they trade goods, they trade services. I've even heard of freelancers trading their services among each other. You know, from the guy that needs the Uber ride, but the guy that's giving it to him needs uh, headshots for his you know his resume type things. Resume writers trading stuff to other people so that they can get whatever service that person's offering. Proofreading, whatever. There's a lot of that still happens now, and it's kind of interesting. And then again, going back to that time bank where people are saying, hey, you know I kind of do this with my friends, right? Hey, I need help building the fence, right? And they're like, okay, cool, we'll be over, we'll so and so, he's the fence builder, we'll get together, we'll build that fence. Well, then they come back and say, hey, I need help with I've got a company. I'm running it off this computer. I've got a website. I need some help with cybersecurity. I help them out with that. You know, it it's not a true barter, because we're not counting time and stuff because we're all friends, right? But that's still a type of bartering, really.
It is.
It is. It very much so is, and it's a good type. And a barter can be as simple as your neighbor has a running lawnmower and you don't, or your neighbor has a backhoe and you don't, and you borrow it from them in exchange for some jam or helping them build a fence. So the sky's the limit when it comes to bartering. And here's the wonderful thing about bartering: when done properly, when done safely, it can actually benefit both parties. and it can, even in a post-apocalyptic time, save you money and hassle. I mean, because let's face it, if your neighbor's got a backhoe and you need a backhoe for an hour, and instead of renting the money or instead of renting it, paying out all that money, you just borrow it and help them out. Works. Everybody benefits.
Totally. I wish I had a neighbor with a backhoe. I'll be honest. I
Don't
do.
we all?
I mean, there's growing up there was bartering. Hey, I
My
go down on
grandparents did it.
you, you go down on me. Oh, sorry.
They may have done that too, but I don't know. Um, but when I was young, we had a person in our community. I grew up in the country. We had, my grandparents. They had a farm at one point, and then they moved down into a smaller house where I grew up in, and they had an acre backyard. Well, uh, my grandfather had a single, tiller, little top mount gas powered, tiller that he would use, but my grandmother would actually trade one of the local farmers who had a full size tractor, and they would come in and they would till the entire backyard. And they'd have it done in like 5-10 minutes max. It was so fast, and everything was lined up so perfectly. And the actual barter was that he would get a certain percentage of the actual growth at the end of
Crop.
the of the,
Yeah.
of the harvest. Yeah, specifically that, and a couple of things of my grandmother's plum jelly that she used to make, which is amazing. I miss it very much. Um, but that's a great example of you know the barter system. But I do want to point something out. There are some things that a community should never take advantage of during for barter situations. Burials, for instance. When a community has a death in a system or a post-apocalyptic way, that is not it's not in good taste to try to barter to help bury somebody, because ultimately that's something that happens to every one of us. We want to be generous and kind during that time, because eventually someone's going to need to return the favor, and it's at those times in which you want people to be generous. So that's one thing that you should never, try to barter for. People need to step up and be a part of that community and give aid where aid is needed for those situations. Now, if you've got a horse that you can spare, uh, yeah, barter that. um, but if you have a kind community, if you are contributing to those around you, your neighbors, then you're going to find that those barters later on are going to be much more successful because you have a meaningful relationship now with the people inside of your community. Um, Protection forces, too. So if you do have a community in a bartering area, you're going to need to run security inside of there. And I may be jumping ahead here, but you know, you're going to have to work up security systems for that. You're going to need to have guards, designated people who are armed. I wouldn't recommend allowing it to be the Wild West in the actual barter area. Um, that's just me. And I am the probably the most pro Second Amendment person in the world, but that's probably the one area where I'd say, let's not do it in there. It's just not a good idea because like Hillbilly was saying, one moldy potato at the wrong time, and we may be digging multiple holes. Sorry, I was a little off
Agreed.
track there.
Absolutely. Now we were talking about bartering that's going on right now. I would think one of the ones, and maybe Hillbilly, you know a little bit more about this than I do, even, but like the Amish communities,
Yes.
um, you
Hmm.
know, they do a lot of inter bartering, barn raising and stuff like that. Now it's community that they do that as, but I would still see that as bartering, and I'm sure they barter to help each other in the fields and stuff like that too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Amish and even the Mennonites,
Yeah.
they're very much into bartering. You know, their whole culture, their whole. If you're not familiar with the Amish, it's basically a society within a society. It's a closed society essentially, and they kind of live outside of the realm of the world that we're used to. So they do have currency. They do have businesses for profit, but in the community themselves, they barter everything. They do barn raisings where it's the whole community comes together, builds a barn for all the horses, house raising, all of those things. So that is a really good example of a society that lives today in multiple countries that barter is their lifestyle and it works really well. I'll leave the religious side out of it, but bartering itself in that society, it is very normal and it's expected.
Yeah.
And when done properly in their society, it really alleviates a lot of pressure because somebody always has your back and you always have somebody else's back. The Amish are great for looking out for each other when it comes to fires, stillborn calves, all of those things. And they do help each other when there's low yield crop years. So yeah, you could learn a lot from the Amish when it comes to bartering. If you're not familiar with them, just YouTube them. There's a lot of stuff out there, specifically focus on like their farming stuff and their cattle ranching and all of that.
Well, speaking of ranchers, and this will come back towards you, Guy, a lot of ranchers are very much like that, where if one ranch is having issues, the other ranch will help out,
Yep.
um, and really do that. Can you talk a little bit about that, Guy?
So, and I would say, and don't look at just cattle. Look at this, across all different animal types. There are a lot of ranchers out there that do their own inoculations. Most of them will do their own inoculations, but not all of them. So you'll see some bartering for the different inoculations on livestock, things of that nature, aiding in fence repairs and things of that nature, especially in flood areas. You'll see, combined land areas. If somebody's on higher land, one rancher will allow for, say, livestock to be brought into the higher areas. So, you're helping out your people, you're helping out your friends. And then later on, of course, that may be repaid. It's not even necessarily a barter at that point. It's just kind of an assumed barter, much like in the Amish or Mennonite community. Um, and you'll also see, trades for beef. Even nowadays, I mean, you can pay for a side of beef from a rancher. You can actually buy, half a cow or even a whole cow with cash. But it's not too unlikely that if let's say you're a roofer and a barn needs a new roof, you may trade your services for helping to either repair or put up a new roof with a rancher to get a freezer full of steaks and cuts of beef. So there's currently a lot of barter happening right now. So, and that's just some of the things that I can think of, but I'm sure there's more that I'm not thinking of. Grazing,
Studying
yeah,
services.
studying services, yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, and we were talking post-apocalyptic, and we've been kind of bouncing back and forth there. So hope we haven't lost everybody. But in that post-apocalyptic world, if you are meeting up with somebody, I mean, you spoke of radiation and security and that, but there's also the health risk factor
Mm.
because you're now in pods, right? You're with your group, right? And they're with their group, and having to watch contamination, just simple as a common cold or the flu could be really bad
Oh
in
yeah.
that aspect because your health isn't going to be as good because you're not going to have, most likely you're not going to have good refrigeration, so you're not doing that, but you're also not going to get access to things like, you know, depending on your area, you may not get access to orange juice anymore,
Yep.
right? There's no more orange juice, so there goes your vitamin C. So now you're looking at it, trying to figure out where you're going to get your vitamin C from, and having the knowledge of where to get those different vitamins from and hey, I don't like to eat my vegetables. I don't like carrots. Well, now you got to eat some carrots because you need that. Because carrots can grow anywhere, right? You need that from those carrots, and having to figure out those different aspects. That's a great knowledge that is going to have to be traded among people. And the same with knowing the home remedies. Which roots, which herbs, and all that. I mean,
Yep.
having someone that can mix those properly and trade those for other things is going to be absolutely important. And then, you know, depending, blacksmithing is going to be huge. Um, you know, reloading ammunition.
Yep.
Ammunition is going to become scarcer and scarcer unless you have somebody that knows how to make gunpowder, and those different types of things.
So, and that's a really good point when you start getting into firearms. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention that none of us have talked about. In a post-apocalyptic, scenario, there's not going to be a lot of entertainment as compared to today, right? So we're not going to be able to switch on the TV. We're not going to be able to listen to our favorite podcast or watch a YouTube video. Um, we're going to be narrowed down to, say, books, physical games, and getting down with your girl, right? So with that comes another thing that you may have to barter for because eventually you may bake a baby. And unless you know how to deliver a baby, you are going to definitely need help. Now, again, this is one of those things I don't say, is necessarily up for barter. It's kind of the community, but you may have to barter for, say, uh, somebody to deliver a child that understands what it means to deliver a child. And if you don't know how to deliver a child, um, you should look it up. It's not the most wonderful thing for most people, but it's a good knowledge to have and be a good thing that you could actually trade for. Um, tell you what, maybe one of the things that we should talk about is, some suggested things that we could actually save up for now for barter. You mentioned one, ammunition, right? So I personally have, not only a stockpile of ammunition itself, but also many, many reloading components. And reloading components, they can actually save you money on what you're doing. You can, yeah, they absolutely will, especially if you are collecting your own brass, resizing it, reforming it, annealing it, reloading it. You're going to need to know, you're either going to need to have powder, and I highly recommend investing in good quality powder now because it has a very long shelf life, very long shelf life. Um, you can make black powder. It is nowhere near as powerful as everyday, powder that you have today, right? Stuff that we have today is made with nitrocellulose, even has nitroglycerin inside of it, is formulated to burn extremely well underneath pressure and produce um, a specific force that black powder just does not have the ability to do. It can move a bullet faster. Um, and this actually, can be compared to explosives. And that's another thing. Do you know how to make explosives? That could be something that you could barter for. If you know how to make TNT and then, move it into dynamite or nitroglycerin, which nitroglycerin is dangerous, don't do nitroglycerin. Um, but if you can make explosives, there may be a beaver dam that needs to be blown, right? There may be a tree stump that you need to get out of the way so that you can plant a field. There's a lot of things that you could start working on now to barter later. One of my favorite things to look at when you're talking about bartering is alcohol, grain alcohol. Um, yeah, you can use it for entertainment, but it's also critical for,
Medicine.
sterilization. Yes, antiseptic. It's actually good for some diseases, for some skin conditions. So, there's a lot of things that I can think of that we could start working on now to barter later. What do you guys think about that?
And you're
So
talking about. Go ahead, Hillbilly.
No, I was going to go a little bit off topic, so go ahead, Hoosier.
I was just going to say you're talking about a lot of very um, sciencey technical aspects. I was going the other way. I have uh, two survival bows
Mm,
and arrows.
yep.
Um, but thinking about learning to be a bowyer or a fletcher,
Yeah.
doing those types of things. Also, going a little differently to everything from horse training to animal husbandry to, you know, knowing again which mushroom's poisonous and which one's not. You know, being able to do all those things that aren't, I'm not going to say aren't science, but
Mhm.
aren't technology related really. They're more of a simpler time. Depending on what happens, we'll be falling back to those. And to be honest, we're probably going to be relearning how to do all that
Oh,
because the people that can do that now are so disappearing in this world. And it's so sad that they are disappearing because those are great things, but because that factory can make it, in 10 seconds using a plastic resin cast,
yep.
nobody's looking for that wooden longbow anymore, or few people are looking for that wooden longbow.
Yeah, there'll be no epoxy available.
The
So,
the Ren the Ren Fair people will come back and be on top.
so Hoosier, I'm glad you kind of brought back, going back, back to the basics because, I do think of it as like the old frontier days, the pioneer days. And, one of the things that you can do today, and it's very easy to get a license for it, talk to the DNR, wildlife management, you can get it at the federal level very simply, is fur trapping. You can very easily become licensed to get into the trapping game. And, that will go a long way because you're not taking the animal for sport. Back during the frontier days, pioneer days, the animal was used not only for food but for clothing, especially in the cold climates, and even in the desert climates. It gets very cold in the desert at night. So having those skills of how to properly trap and fur everything and being able to barter those is goes a long way. The frontier of America was really founded on, especially out in the West, was really founded on fur trapping and going into town and trading that fur, a lot of times not for finances, but for actual goods, tobacco and flour and all of
Mm,
those things so that the frontiermen could and ladies could survive the winter and up in the mountains. So that's another aspect that could be started now. Again, do not do that on your own. There are regulations around it. Wildlife, Fish and Game, DNR, all those places can point you in the right direction of how to get properly licensed and trained for doing that.
Absolutely do not do it on your own. Make sure you have the proper, uh, not just licenses and regulations, but the proper gear.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
you have to be very careful with some of those traps because they will bite you back in
Well,
a hurry.
I've been bitten by one. I actually own a trap, and I had a trigger on my thumb, and damn near took it off one time.
Yeah.
And it was a small
Um,
trap.
yeah. So you're absolutely right. Tannering and furs and, you know, um, weavers, not just
Mm,
Mm.
basket weavers, but actual, fabric weavers. That's going to be something that's going to be a talent again to come back to and have to learn all over again potentially. You
And
know.
if you want to learn weaving, the Native Americans, depending on where you live, they have uh, learning sessions that they will provide to anybody. You don't have to be Native American to join. You just have to be respectful and everything, and they'll teach you how to weave. You can learn all those little tricks. Now it's hard. It's hard manual labor to do that. You really got to have some muscle, but those skills can come in great handy, especially if you're going to be going the trapping route.
Yeah, the nations will teach you lots of things if you ask. You know, they have courses, they have, you know, different uh, classes that they teach, because a lot of them want to teach their history, their heritage. You know, they want you to learn about their heritage. So yeah, absolutely. You want to see people survive and adapt. There's no better place to look. You know,
And I think that's a
they do that.
I think that's a great point, especially with weaving, um, being able to produce new clothing is going to be a hot barter item, especially socks, right? My socks, underwear. I mean, yeah. You ever seen a pair of old West underwear? No,
Oh
No,
yeah.
because they don't exist, my friends.
but
um,
socks,
socks,
I can
definitely.
tell you from being a prior military person, I had to have new socks every day.
Yep.
I could, you know, I could wear the same uniform for a long time if I had to, but I was changing my damn socks, and I was going to have clean socks, clean, dry socks.
Yeah.
Now explain for those that may not know why having clean, dry socks is extremely important.
Your feet, if you lose your, to put it simply, if you lose your feet, you're done.
Yep.
If you can't walk, if you can't move, you know, if you lose your feet, that's one of the worst things you could lose. I can work with one arm, I can probably work with half a leg, but if I lose my feet, both my feet, I would have been done for. So keeping them clean, keeping them dry, because, you know, when things get moist, what happens? You know, you get mold, you get bacteria, you get all
Oh, yeah.
sorts of nasty things. Um, but yeah, absolutely having clean, dry socks. And to be honest, it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
It really does. At least it
Morale
did for
booster.
me. You know, you put on those clean socks, you know, your feet, you dry your feet off, you put on a nice pair of fresh socks, and yeah, your boots still suck, but, you know, having those dry socks just makes you feel better. It's not as good as a shower, but when you don't have a shower, you know, it's one of those things, man.
So, and it seems like we're kind of coming to some basic facts, and it comes back to time and being able to barter your time, whether it's plowing in the field or more so the skills that you have. So it sounds like learning some of these critical skills is going to be one of the strongest barter opportunities that you have. Imagine investing in a loom before something happened and you had the ability to actually create mass amounts of fabric and or blue jeans. You could be the new Levi Strauss.
Well, and imagine, you know, I know Guy likes to work with wood. Imagine learning how to build those looms,
Yep,
being the person
absolutely.
that can provide that, or, you know, being able to provide just basic furniture. I
Indeed.
mean, one of the things that eventually we're gonna have to make are beds. You know, I don't want to go to sleeping on a straw freaking a bed, a sack stuffed with straw.
And
I
feather
wouldn't survive that.
no, you're gonna want to try to figure out how to make a feather mattress eventually. Or maybe you have a blacksmith that's really talented that could actually make coils. I mean, that would be an amazing event. But I mean, the world revolved around those basic trades. Before the Industrial Revolution, I mean, a blacksmith was critical to a town. You'd have to have one. Carpenters would be critical to the town. You have to have
You
one.
know what's going to be really critical to a new town?
Plumbing.
Well, plumbing, but also the guy taking the trash
Oh,
away
yes.
from the city,
Great
getting
point.
rid of it. I mean, you're going to recycle as much as you can, but there's going to be some things you can't recycle. You that are useless. You don't want that piling up in your freaking town. You know,
No.
there's gonna be those, some of those jobs that people look down on nowadays, which I don't understand why they look down on. But there's those are gonna be important.
Yep. Burn barrels will definitely be a thing again.
Yep, but also, one of the jobs that'll be interesting to see again is like, if there's no vehicles running, right, for whatever reason, but like a Pony Express.
Yep. Yeah.
What was
Yeah,
that? What was that Kevin Costner movie?
The postman.
Dances with Wolves.
The Postman.
Yeah.
The
The
Postman.
Postman. Yes.
That, that's gonna become a thing again because that's the only way you're gonna be able to talk to anybody else. And yeah, we're gonna have to talk to each other. So,
Yep.
sorry, Hillbilly, go ahead.
No, no. I was going to say you absolutely hit it spot on. And a lot of these things, you don't have to today to prepare yourselves if you're even if you're just interested in learning about them. You know, a lot of places throughout the nation have frontier days. They have old west setups, living farms, historical things like that, where you can go see a blacksmith in action. If you've never seen one, you can go see one. It's a beautiful art form. Tin workers. Tin is very easy to work with. There's a plethora of tin out there that you can bend and cut and with very few tools and really just hone the craft and have very useful things out of it. Also, if you look at history, you don't have to be a history buff, but if you go like ancient Rome, Greece, how they made things work, how they made aqueducts work, there's a lot of different things that you can start learning now that would give you that asset in a any type of apocalyptic situation or even any type of crisis situation, really, for that matter. Um, it would really benefit you, and it's fun to do for some people.
Totally.
Campfire cooking, cast iron cook-offs. I don't know if you all have those where
Oh
you're
yeah,
at, but
Yep.
those are freaking awesome to go to. And some of those people that cook those cast irons inside those like cast iron pots and make desserts or just different meals, man, blows my mind. I mean, I would rather eat that than go to a fancy restaurant sometimes
Uh,
because it's just that much better.
I had a smoked rib roast that was made in a Dutch oven one time, and it was one of the best smoked rib roast I've ever had in my life. And I was stunned because what they did, it was a big Dutch oven. And they laid down something to prop up the meat. They put some wood chips down underneath it. They set it on the fire, and it smoked inside of there in a few hours. They said it took a few hours to complete, and then it came out. It looked like it'd been on a smoker in somebody's backyard or at a restaurant, and it was just beautiful. Um, and interestingly, going back to my grandmother, on her back porch, she had a legitimate cauldron, a giant cast iron cauldron that when she was little, they used for laundry. And
Mm-hmm.
when I say big, I mean as an 8-year old, I could climb in this thing and use it for hide and seek. It was about 3.5 feet off the ground. I mean, and it was made to set and build a fire underneath it so that you could heat the water inside of it. So you could, yeah, um, thing probably weighed
My
100 some
grandmother
pounds.
made her own soap for
Yeah,
both laundry and washing. And that was just because when she was growing up, that's what they did. So, using those different fats and stuff to make soap was just wild science to me as a kid.
yeah. Did she make the
yes,
old lye soaps or?
No, 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 no. She made it was a fat based soap. I don't know how else
Yeah,
to put it because I was like 5 years old.
So yeah,
So
it's most lye based soaps are actually they start out with fats of some sort. Um, if you ever want to see a one way to make soap, you can always watch Fight Club.
Yes, soap making is a wonderful art form. It's really not that difficult,
Mhm.
and actually, there's a lot of people that are going back to homemade soap for many reasons. I'm not going to say it could save you money, but you definitely will know if your clothes are clean or not. The other aspect of this is if we're talking about a time period where there's not going to be electricity readily
Mm.
available or at all, learning how to make candles,
I was
learning.
just thinking that.
Yes, candles. If you're lucky enough, kerosene heat. But really, candles is one of those things you can make them in batches. It doesn't take that much time, and the supplies you need are very few. And then you have light day and night whenever you need it. But along with that, if you're going to go that route, you also got to keep in mind that you need a way to light the candle. So having a flint, a striker, that would go a long way as well. And probably knowing how to use the flint, practicing that at home, that could be also very beneficial.
And flint, uh, not only used for making sparks, remember, used for making arrowheads and hatchets and tools, because it can be broken at a very sharp edge and formed. If you know how to do it. So, um, in certain those situations over a long enough timeline, we are going to go back to some very primitive options.
Well, and that's one of the things that I've invested in. Um, Not only just because it's something I like, but knives, hatchets. Um, you know, I've even got a couple of swords, but not the kind of swords you're thinking. I've got you know swords for hunting and swords for defense, not like a katana, but like a rapier
Yep.
or a saber, and spears. I got two hunting spears. So, blades are something that I think everyone should have a good knife. Now, my family, we give a knife every Christmas. Everybody gets a knife in their stocking. One way or another, you're getting a knife in your stocking.
Nice.
Um, the kids get the little wooden knives, but everybody gets a knife because it's just that's what we do. Now, they're not always, you know, a benchmark or something like that or benchmade. They're sometimes they're the cheap little knife, and the cheap little knife sometimes is one of the knives that I carry. My everyday carry. I carry a small little knife because it's legal in every state. It's a fold and it's small, and I keep it sharp and I keep it clean,
Yep.
and it does every job I need to. So I absolutely agree that at some point we will probably have to get back to primitive weapons. But I think overall, because there will be so much metal lying around,
Yeah.
that blacksmiths will still be able to keep metal weapons made.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, one of my favorite knives, and it's the name is escaping me right now, but they'll take leaf springs from
Mm-hmm.
trucks, and they're hand forged. Actually, they're made. I think they're made in. Oh, good grief! I don't think it's India. It's somewhere over there. It's you're gonna know what it is. It's a kukri. The kukri,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a traditional kukri that's made, and I think they're made in Afghanistan now. I think about the hills of Afghanistan, and they're made of 1095 steel from the leaf springs, and they are awesome. If you don't know what a kukri is, look it up and then just buy one, because they are amazing tools. So you can chop with them, you can butcher with them, you can hunt with them, and hell yeah, you can defend yourself with one of those things. It's basically a crooked
Well,
sword.
there is. I thought it was India, but I could be wrong. There's a military force that they specifically train with the kukri.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I thought it was India, but I'm probably wrong. Again, in the comments, tell me I'm wrong. Tell
Yeah.
me how stupid I am, and then tell me the right place to look.
Or just tell us
Uh,
where it's made. Yeah.
yeah, you know, um, there's there's going to be a lot of things that happen then.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, Hillbilly, we're down to our last little bit here. Uh, what are some final thoughts from the great Hillbilly?
My final thoughts are this: bartering, it's never stopped. It's the oldest way of doing things. It is still a really great way of doing things. It's something that if you feel comfortable with, definitely take a look at. Take a look at bartering with neighbors, friends, trusted people, all of that. And if nothing else, if you're not interested in learning about that, definitely take a look at learning candles, how to fur trap, how to fish without a modern day lure, and all of that. Take a look at all that stuff. Knowledge is power. So the more you can learn, the better. And some of the stuff is really cool. But at the end of the day, just stay safe out there and keep having fun.
All right, and um, you're absolutely right. Knowing is always better than not knowing. You know, if you're not good at something, focus on something you're good at and know where you can use that to be able to be beneficial. And again, yeah, if you've got good neighbors or you got even family around you, maybe y'all can find some different things that you can trade in, to be able to help each other out and maybe lower, save some money. Somebody's growing tomatoes, somebody's growing corn, somebody's growing, whatever. Maybe y'all can come together and find ways to each take one item and learn to grow it and trade it. And one of the things that I think is really going to be important if it comes down to that kind of time frame is beekeepers. So if
Mm,
you're a beekeeper out there, you're awesome. Uh, you know, honey can be used in so many ways, but just we'll need the bees to help us grow the produce and the food and everything.
absolutely.
So beekeepers are absolutely going to be a necessity. Um, and remember, knowing is half the battle. Yo, Joe.
So I would say that, for my closing remarks, go out and learn something. Learn how to do something that you think that you feel like you're going to enjoy. Invest some time in it. Um, know what it means. Know what's going to have to happen with it. Understand the supplies that you'll need for it. Maybe build a stock on that. Um, if you don't have time for that, stock up on ammunition and guns because there'll always be people that needs ammunition. Um, and quite honestly, if depending on how much you have, you may turn around and find you're the wealthiest person in your community, depending on how much ammunition you have. So, but the skills that you can offer, that's going to aid in the rebuilding of your community more so than anything else. It's also going to possibly create lifelong bonds that may be carried on for generations. So, learn something. And yeah, knowing is half the battle. The rest of it is sweat.
So from a guy, a Hoosier, and a hillbilly, we love you. Talk to you later.